New movement towards possible talks to end the Iran war, even as the president insists he's in no rush to make a deal despite growing economic and political pressure. The White House announced today Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will travel to Islamabad tomorrow. Iran's foreign minister arrived in Islamabad earlier today, but Iran state media says he will be speaking to the Pakistanis about ending the war and will not hold any negotiations with the Americans there. Here's what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said earlier today.
The president has decided to dispatch Special Envoy Witkoff and Jared Kushner back to Islamabad. The Iranians want to talk. They want to talk in person. And so the president is, as I've said many, many times to all of you, always willing to give diplomacy a chance. So Steve and Jared will be heading to Pakistan tomorrow to hear the Iranians out. We hope progress will be made, and we hope that positive developments will come from this meeting. And we will see. And the president, the vice president, the secretary of state will be waiting here in the United States for updates, and the vice president, I understand, is on standby and will be willing to dispatch to Pakistan if we feel it's a necessary use of his time.
Now, it comes after both the president and the defense secretary say they are in no rush to negotiate a deal.
I don't want to rush it. I want to take my time. We have plenty of time, and I want to get a great deal. I want to get a deal where our nation and the world is safe from lunatics with nuclear weapons.
President Trump said it again yesterday. We have all the time in the world, and we're not anxious for a deal. And I hear him say it every day in private as well. Iran knows that they still have an open window to choose wisely. As we said previously, choose wisely at the negotiating table. All they have to do is abandon a nuclear weapon in meaningful and verifiable ways, or instead they can watch their regime's fragile economic state collapse under the unrelenting pressure of American power. A blockade as long as it takes.
The Trump administration is facing what appears to be an Iranian regime that's willing to wait out the president. 5 Western officials telling NBC News the regime in Iran is more stable now than before the war and slightly more hardline. One of those officials also saying, quote, the Iranians don't seem to be in a rush to negotiate. Meanwhile, the president is touting the 3-week extension of the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire. Here's what he said about that deal yesterday while hosting the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors in the Oval Office.
They've agreed to an additional 3 weeks of, no firing, ceasefire, no more firing. Let's see. We hope that happens. It's not going to happen between them, but they do have Hezbollah to think about. And we're going to be working with Lebanon to get things straightened out in that country.
Despite those comments, Israel and Hezbollah continue to exchange fire today. The Iran-backed militant group saying it attacked Israeli soldiers in southern Lebanon today, while the Israeli military confirms it struck Hezbollah military structures also in southern Lebanon. Joining me now to start us off is NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons, who is in Islamabad for us. Monica, let me start with you at the White House. Let's talk about the fact that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are heading to Pakistan, not the vice president. What do we make of this, Monica?
Yeah, I think that is very telling, Kristen, about how the U.S. is viewing these negotiations and also what it could mean for the time frame. Remember that they were part of those initial talks way back before the war against Iran started. They left empty-handed without a deal, and then they have been a part of the negotiating team since then, but they did accompany Vice President Vance when they went the first time to Islamabad, and they came up short. They weren't able to get to an agreement there with Iran after a 21-hour marathon session. And then we have seen a couple of times where it seemed like maybe the team was going to get back together and head over there with the vice president, only for that to be pulled back. So it does seem like this is a White House that's acknowledging that maybe they can't get a lot of this accomplished in the near term, and that is why they're going to wait to send the vice president until maybe there's more of an indication that a framework can actually be achieved. I think they're a little bit concerned about him going there again and then walking away without a deal, and then what that means for the president's threats that he has made over and over again. It just seems like this is a really critical moment, but where the White House is sort of watching and waiting before they're determining next steps. Kristen.
Yeah, it absolutely seems like that. Keir, let me head to you in Islamabad. Iran saying Foreign Minister Araghchi isn't there to negotiate, in fact, with the U.S. delegation. What do you make of that? Do you think that that's posturing? Will that change when Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner arrive?
Well, I think it's confusing, Kristen. There's thunder and lightning here in Islamabad, which I think is a pretty apt backdrop for what's likely to go on through this weekend. Certainly the Iranians are here, that much we can say for sure. You heard Monica describing that. The foreign minister actually is here. He just arrived and was welcomed by the de facto leader of Pakistan, Field Marshal Munir, and by the leader, the leader of Pakistan. And look, the thing is that both the Pakistanis and the Iranians, through Iranian state media, are saying that all that's going to happen right now are talks between Iran and Pakistan. It takes about 15 or 16 hours to get here by plane from the US. So you can't imagine that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner can be here until tomorrow night. And then we are hearing that the Iranian team, you can hear that thunder, the Iranian team are going to be in Oman on Sunday. And it's a few hours flight to Oman. So there's a small window for a conversation that might not even be a conversation.
Well, it couldn't be a more dramatic backdrop. Certainly the natural elements, the diplomatic elements at play, Keir. And as we're engaging in this live shot, please, Keir, be safe. If you need to take cover, do that if you need to. Keir, do you think, and can you characterize what kind of progress would actually need to be made in order for the vice president to get engaged in these talks?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just put up an umbrella to protect myself from the rain, at least, Christine. Look, it's a good question. What we know is that the person who has been leading the delegation from Iran, the Speaker of the Parliament, Galabaf, he's not here. There was some talk through the week, reports, particularly in Israeli media, that he had resigned from the delegation. And that's, I guess, that maybe the fact that he's not here lends some credence to that. But it may also be that the Iranians don't want to make it look as if they are sending a high-powered delegation here. And I think that might be one of the reasons why the vice president hasn't come, because the Iranians aren't sending their head of delegation. It's anyone's guess where it goes from here. Whether, I guess, to put a positive spin on it, can there be a conversation between President Trump's son-in-law and his envoy and the foreign minister of Iran that gets them towards some sort of an agreement, some sort of an understanding that opens up more talks? But really right now, for this weekend, it does look as if it will be talks about talks. And it's impossible, this bravado, if you like, on both sides, saying we don't need to compromise, the other side will compromise, we will punish you if you don't compromise. It's impossible to tell from that how much either side is ready to back down, if you like. I mean, certainly, I think it's pretty clear President Trump doesn't want to reignite the conflict. I think at the same time, from what he says, he's certainly prepared to. And the Iranians, I think, feel similarly, but are also prepared for more of a fight, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's a good reading of the current state of play. And to that point, Monica, it was extraordinary. This statement by the president, he's in no rush to make a deal, he says publicly, yet we've seen the polling. He's facing some of the lowest approval ratings of his entire administration, underwater on his handling of the war in Iran, of the economy. Based on your conversations with your sources inside the West Wing, Monica, how much pressure is the administration actually feeling to end this war?
Yeah, Kristen, the president may say that publicly, but privately, according to my conversations with sources familiar with the discussions, there is certainly an anxiety about trying to figure out a timeline to wrap this up. The president definitely wants to do that, and Iran is proving to be more patient, proving to really not be in any kind of a rush to make a deal in the near term. We know there are a couple of sort of artificial deadlines that are looming for the president as he is thinking about this. Next week, he does have that very high-profile state visit from King Charles, and then a couple of just days after that, the U.S. and the Trump administration will be preparing for that high-profile trip to Beijing, to China, that we know, according even to the White House, when they were asked about this a few weeks ago, their goal was to have the war against Iran wrapped up before then. That is what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had said. That was the goal. That was the anticipation. Remember, this started out as a 4 to 6 week military conflict. We're now in week 8. So I do think there is pressure, certainly, to figure out how this all ends.
Keir, one more to you, finally. Obviously, we know there is that ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. It's going to be extended for 3 weeks. How closely are those countries watching what's happening in Pakistan? It's all interrelated, of course.
It is, and I would put it the other way around in many ways. Here in Pakistan and in Iran, they're watching very closely what's happening in Lebanon. I think that 3-week ceasefire was crucial to even begin to be able to have a conversation about Iran and vice versa. We know, of course, the links between Hezbollah and Iran, and the two are dependent on each other, but they are parallel tracks. They are twin tracks. Look, in a sense, I guess you could say that is some progress, albeit extremely complex and fragile progress. But at the same time, the main event is here this weekend in Islamabad.
Well, we know you'll be tracking every twist and turn very closely. Keir Simmons, thank you from Islamabad. Monica Alba from the White House. Thanks to both of you for starting us off.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.